And Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this very important gathering today. I'd like to thank our colleagues who are with us, Paul Matthew from the Worcester Regional Research Bureau, Mary Keefe, who is one of our state reps, and Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rachel Monárrez. Today we'll be talking about school buildings here in Worcester. Worcester, like many of the gateway city school districts, is challenged in terms of the number of older facilities that it has. The city and the state spend a lot of dollars and a lot of attention on addressing the needs of our schools. But the needs of schools are very different than they were when many of us were learners in the schools. And what we need to do to keep pace with being future ready and preparing our kids not just for now, but for the futures that will be theirs, is something that is very important and that we have to plan carefully for. So with that, I am going to lob things over to our Superintendent of Schools, Rachel Monárrez.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So I want to take some time just to walk us through what school buildings look like for Worcester Public Schools and why this work is so incredibly important when we think about preparing our scholars for the future. So next slide, please. So I can just talk a little bit about, give us some context to the actual number of buildings and where the city of Worcester is in terms of our facilities. So overall, we have 60 buildings in Worcester. So that doesn't mean we have 60 schools. Some of our schools have more than one building, but the physical buildings, it's 60 buildings. Give or plus some, because we do some leasing of other buildings in the community. So sometimes we go up, sometimes we go down, but that's about where we're at. 11 of those buildings were constructed before 1900, which is, it's pretty phenomenal that we are educating children in 2023 in buildings that were constructed before the 1900s. And then 14 of them between 1900 to 1940. Still very, very old schools. So what does that mean for Worcester? That, you know, and before I even say that, I frequently say that there's the beauty of these older buildings, and they're so incredibly, the detail of them and the potential of what they can be is pretty spectacular. And yet at the same time, when we think about future ready, obviously the buildings aren't anywhere to what a modern business looks like today. And so in 2017, there was a comprehensive facilities assessment that took place. And at that time, it said that 22 of these 66 buildings needed to be replaced or major renovation. And at that time, the cost was going to be nearly $70 million. That was in 2017. So you can only imagine where we are now in terms of the number of schools that need to be renovated or replaced, and the amount of money that it would cost for that to take place. And I want to be very clear that there's not a major funding source for this to take place. The way the system is currently set up is you apply through the Massachusetts School Building Association, and then they approve renovation projects or replacement projects. So Doherty is an example of one of those projects that has been approved recently. Burncoat High School is now in the pipeline. But the cost of that is both combined with MSBA provides funding for it, but then the expectation is that the city picks up an additional side of it. So there is a large fiscal impact on the overall city budget without a lot of revenue sources with that. So that's important to the current state, because if we really want to be able to provide for our scholars what they deserve, what any child in any school in the state of Massachusetts deserves, the facilities is step one. And that's really kind of the basic ground level work, right? So this is where we're at as a district. And I'm going to say that the cost is a lot more than what the $70 million and this facilities assessment, which today show more than 22 buildings that need to be replaced or renovated if we were to redo another one. Next slide. And why is this important? Because I want you to, and Julie, I'm just going to ask you to click until all the pictures come up. Does this look familiar to you? Do we see, I mean, can you see maybe your daughter, son, niece, nephew, grandchildren in these images? Because this is the reality of our children's lives now, right? They're in groups and they're still on their phones. And this is not just about phones. This is about the way that children look at life, and the need to be connected digitally is just part of their upbringing. And we as the adults, we probably wish we could put our phones away more frequently than we can. But for our children, their lives are all about having a phone with them or having connectivity to the greater world. And so that has implications around access to Wi-Fi. That is something that you can count on, right? It has implications to the work that happens behind it. So what I like to refer to as the infrastructure. And then preparing children for the future jobs is also part of this, whether they are using the technology or they're the ones behind it, creating the programming and improving upon that work. So the importance of the facilities, again, as Jennifer said at the beginning, cannot be understated, because to educate children in what the future is going to look like in our buildings that date back to the previous century is a hard place to bring all that together, right? It just logically, it doesn't make sense. So that's really important to understanding this, the importance of school facilities on the optimal ability for a child to thrive and be successful as an adult. The next slide shows you what the employers are looking for when it comes to skills for our youth. And there's really two parts, and this changes kind of every year, but there's some similarities that I've noted stay true. So the first side are these soft skills people will talk about. And these soft skills, I don't think that they're soft. I think that they're essential skills. They're life skills. The ability to work in teams, the ability to be a leader, not because you have that title, but because you can influence others to think outside of what their daily experiences might be like. Attention to detail, being flexible and adaptable. We all know coming out of COVID, that was a major skill that we had to learn if we weren't there. And so teaching our children how to practice these soft skills, emotional intelligence and communication, that's essential to their success in a thriving workforce, whether that start with going to college and moving on to a career, going into a technical school and moving on to a career, or going straight into the workforce. This is what employers are saying they're looking for. And so learning experiences in the school need to start modeling that of what employers are looking for. Facilities and the learning environment is essential to that. The other side of this image is the technical skills that employers are looking for. So you can see by looking at that the technical skills are things like software development, because that's the part of the infrastructure, right? Behind the scenes work about being connected digitally and what that all looks like. The ability to work with different sets of data and look at trends and patterns, that's really important. Proficiency with AI, artificial intelligence. So we are shifting from, or I'm going to say we have shifted as a nation or as a generation, from being an information society to being one of artificial intelligence, where a lot of the work that we used to prepare children to do as adults is being revamped and done by artificial intelligence, because that's what happens when you have more connectivity. You've got these programs now that can use the information that's in the internet, right, that is available in the cloud, and make sense of it. I'm going to give you a quick example. My husband and I just came back from a trip, and we went through customs, and we used, you used to have to take out your passport and show your passport. All we had to do now was they took a picture of our face, and the AI connected our face to our passport to show that this is indeed the right person. So now quickly you can think that those positions of customs officers is starting to change, right? The AI behind it, the development behind it, we have to prepare our children to be able to do that. The classroom setting that has strong Wi-Fi connection, that has enough space for children to even work in these collaborative teams. The classroom setting that allows for, what's the word I'm looking for? Maker spaces for children to be innovative and entrepreneurial in their thinking. That is essential to them being ready for the future ready work that we don't even know that what it's going to look like, but we know that we have to prepare them for that unknown, which is that flexibility and adaptability. So buildings and what our schools look like and feel like are essential to preparing our children to be future ready. Next slide. If you don't believe me on this AI stuff, is it moving forward? There we go. I want to just talk through this slide because AI is happening very quickly. So this slide shows us kind of the adaptability, or how quickly people have grabbed onto the different tools that have been out there in our lives. So over a 45-month period, you can see it took 41 months for Netflix users to reach 1 million users. 41 months. That's almost 2 years. Close. No, 4 years, right? That's a long time. Twitter, it took 24 months for it to reach 1 million users. So that's 2 years. Facebook, it took 10. Instagram, 2.5. ChatGPT, which is a primary tool for artificial intelligence, 5 days for it to reach 1 million users. And we're way beyond that. This data comes from November 2023. So when we say in education, when you hear the fact that artificial intelligence, and we've shifted from information technology to artificial intelligence, is the way we're going, it's happening, and our children are using it all the time. And so we have to give them opportunities to use it appropriately, right? To use it in a way that helps them to accelerate their thinking. Because what the artificial intelligence can't do is it can't bring in the human element. But classroom experiences do that for our youth. And so again, the learning environment is essential to that. Next slide then shows, all right, so how is Worcester Public Schools doing that? Well, we have launched, and the school committee approved, our vision of a learner. And there's a lot of work behind this kind of fan-looking diagram. But really the vision of a learner are the skills and dispositions that we are committed to ensuring that every child has upon graduating from Worcester Public Schools. We've just started this work. This is our second year in getting into it. And so there's a lot more work to be done behind it, but you can look at these 5 categories and you can think about what I just showed you from what our employers are looking for, and it's all layered in there. And so again, school facilities are essential to making sure that we can create the learning environment and the experiences, the tasks that children need, so that they can practice the vision of a learner starting in kindergarten and practice it every year as they move up and upon graduating, and making sure that we're doing that in a relevant and rigorous manner. And so what we've done, next slide, is we have embedded this vision of a learner into our recently adopted by our school committee, December of 2022, our strategic plan, which is what we refer to as our promise for our future, and our promise to our youth and to our families. And in the strategic plan, which was developed through my listening and learning tour, when I started in the district last school year, I met with hundreds of people and asked them 3 basic questions. What are the strengths of Worcester Public Schools? What are the opportunities for improvement? And what would they do if they were me, to help prioritize? And what came out of that loud and clear was one of our 6 areas, and that is modernized and safe facilities. So the community is saying, we see the need, and we see it at the administrative level. And so we were very intentional about putting in a priority around modernized and safe facilities. So the next slide shows us what that priority is. So by the end of 2028, right, school year end of 2028, Worcester Public Schools is committed to ensuring that each of our school facilities has the infrastructures to support equitable access to 21st teaching and learning environments, so that the vision of a learner can actually come to fruition, so that it doesn't matter what part of the city that you live in, that you have access to these equitable learning environments, so that you can thrive and be the best learner that you can be, and that our educators have those tools as well. The aims is the direction by which we're going, right? So do we need to increase, expand, decrease? And in this area around modernize and safe facilities, we have 4 aims. This is the only priority that has 4 aims, because it's very broad, it's very ambitious. And it's extremely necessary. It's really part of a legacy, right? So one of our aims is to increase spending on facilities so that we can repair and maintain our schools, the grounds, and the district buildings. In the past, there was very little money put to building repair. And I'm just talking the basic maintenance of buildings. So we have these very old buildings, but then we had about $3 million to maintain these very old buildings. That is not possible to maintain that many buildings that are that old with that amount of money. I purchased a home that's early 1900s, and it's only one home, and we have a lot of work to do in it. So you imagine 60 buildings, there's quite a bit. Next aim is to identify really finding ways to renovate and replace our buildings, so that they are future ready. So that has to do also with not only identification and prioritization, but then funding behind it. Our next aim is to increase our responsiveness to repair and maintenance. So although we don't have a huge budget, but we have more than we used to, because we put some additional funds aside, and our city manager is working with this as well. So we've got more money there. Not enough, but it's more than what we had, and we're very grateful for it. And we want to be responsive when our schools tell us that they need something. I was just at a school yesterday, and sadly, a pipe burst in the ceiling, and there were all these books in that room, and so some of them we lost, and we were able to, of course, take care of the repair, thankfully. But those kind of things happen regularly at our schools, and so we have to be responsive to what that looks like and feels like for our students and our staff. And then finally, we really want to expand future ready opportunities. So our students that we're partnering with the community, which is why I'm very grateful for this forum here, because we can't do this by ourselves, and we need to do it with people. You know, we're educators. We do have a business side of the house, but overwhelming, Worcester Public Schools is a district that is being led and by people who went into education. So building's it's not our jam, but we're learning how to do it because we know how important it is to our scholars. So what's it going to look like as we improve? Next slide shows some renderings, as well as some of our high schools that we actually already have in place. So prior to my arrival, Mayor Petty was very clear, and it's my understanding he said this very early on in his tenure as the mayor, that he wanted all the high schools in Worcester to be renovated or remodeled, redone. And so down in the down corner, if you're facing the screen, it's on your left-hand side, that's South High. So that opened last school year, fully remodeled. It is a beautiful campus. We have We have programming in there for diesel. We have a culinary programming in there. We have early childhood programming in there. We've got a beautiful community medical center in there. The spaces for our youth, the library. I mean, it feels like a little mini mini college campus. And the children are, they're very proud. They're proud of their school. They're proud to be colonels, regardless of where we, what we think about it. They're proud of being part of South High School. And that's what we want to be able to provide for all of our youth. The picture up on the top corner to the right, I think that is also at South. I'm not 100% sure because I can't tell if it's a rendering, but there's something similar to that at the school. But then you've got the Doherty rendering up in the top left-hand corner. So Doherty is going to be quite the high school. We're increasing the enrollment. It'll be open to 1,600 students. I have a feeling that's not going to be enough. We will have 5 different pathways in there, some of which already exist in Doherty, but they don't have necessarily the facilities to support it. So they have a program, but then it's in a basic classroom. So they're limited in what they can offer. North High has also been renovated prior to South. North has an EMT program that we're still working with Quinn Sig on, and it has a few other programs, but the one that we need to get done is now Burncoat, which again, we just got that into the MSBA. We're very excited about that. And so we will be working with the community and partnering to talk about what, and really envisioning what this can look like. It's a 5 to 7 year process. So you could think about how many students will graduate from Burncoat High School before the new building is in place, right? And what kind, that's almost a full generation of children that still will not be in buildings that are future ready, but we're better than what we were. And so that's something we always want to think about. The bottom right-hand corner, that is pretty sure that is South High School's auditorium, which is another beautiful auditorium. Okay, so now I've corrected myself. The 2 bottom are South High School, the 2 top are Doherty. And so what you can see in the top for Doherty and the top right is that is like it can be used for multiple purposes, but that's where children can practice, they can have that opportunity for the teamwork that needs to happen, the communication, the collaborative structures. Again, very much like what a college campus feels like, where children can go and learn with each other and really develop beyond what they would with a classroom teacher, because you learn when you're speaking with others. That's how learning happens. The adult helps to scaffold it to a higher level, but children learn from each other, and then we add to that. So this is what we want, but not just at our high schools, because our middle schools need to propel our children into those high school settings. And then what does that look like at the elementary level? I can tell you, I walk into elementary schools and they use every nook and cranny to meet all the different needs of our youth. And many of them have now taken their libraries and they're using them for other reasons, but then now they don't have libraries, right? So how do we transform our schools so that every school at every level is future ready? It's going to take the entire community working together to make that happen. But when we do, the next slide reminds us that it is about these children that we serve and what they deserve, and what they can become for us in the future. And I have no doubt in my mind that Worcester can do this together. And I have no doubt that there's not a huge desire and love for it to happen for our youth. So with that, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity just to share where we're at as it comes to future ready facilities. And I look forward to listening to the rest of the dialogue.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Monárrez. Let me now introduce Paul Matthews, who is the Executive Director of the Worcester Regional Research Bureau. The funding of public school buildings in Massachusetts is very complex. And the Research Bureau with the support of WEC, just completed a study looking at some of the issues surrounding school buildings and school building funding. So Paul, take it away.
Thanks very much, Jen. I'll do my best to carry the baton from you and Dr. Monárrez. I want to first say thank you to Jen and WEC. As she referenced, they provided some seed funding to the Bureau to enable us to really prioritize a comprehensive review of school facility needs in Worcester. So let me first say, for those who do not know, and there might be some of you in the audience, Worcester is very fortunate, in my biased opinion, to benefit from the work of the Bureau. We're a 4-person staff, we're a 501c3, and we've been around since the mid-'80s. So we've been very fortunate in a community of our size to be able to have a research entity that provides direct, data-based, objective, and non-ideological research on issues affecting the community. So we were honored to be able to contribute to this conversation. I came in 2019 before the pandemic as executive director. I'm a Worcester resident native. I'm an alum of the Worcester Public Schools. I'm a parent of 2 alums of the Worcester Public Schools, one at Doherty, one at Worcester Technical High School. And we know firsthand the importance of the Worcester Public Schools to our community, our economy, and our future. And it's really important to focus on Dr. Monárrez's point, the scholars and what they need, because every school should be future ready. And we wanted to contribute to that conversation meaningfully, as the Bureau has in the past. So I do want to thank WEC for this opportunity and thank them for their financial support, enabling us to prioritize this work. I want to thank the City of Worcester, City Manager Batista, and particularly CFO Tim McGurthy for his assistance in providing data for our work. I want to thank Superintendent Monárrez and Brian Allen, her deputy, who were instrumental in providing us data from their perspective. I want to thank the Bureau's leadership who allowed us to do this. And I particularly want to thank my colleague, Anthony Clough, who worked tirelessly on this, including all weekend, in order to make sure we had it ready for release. So it was in fact released today. I see it's in the chat. And I particularly want to note that this is an issue that's not just Worcester Public Schools. The city plays a key leadership role. And the superintendents and the city managers, going back for the last 20 years, have played a key leadership role in ensuring that the city's high schools, to her point with Mayor Petty, could be reconstructed. And we're in the final stage of that work. And that has happened across city councils, across school committees, across the last 4 city managers, and across, I believe, the last 4 superintendents. So that's to be commended. I'll now share my screen and attempt to work my way through a presentation on our report. So I see I'm indeed screen sharing, so I'll move forward. This presentation will be made available to WEC for posting afterwards, and there is a link that we have on the slide here, but go to our website, wrrb.org, to download the report itself. Now, why are school facilities important? And I will endeavor not to simply repeat what Dr. Monárrez said, but we thought this was really important to spotlight the project that I think exemplifies this approach right now in the city of Worcester, which is in fact the Doherty project. I am not sharing that because I'm an alum of Doherty, and I'm not sharing that because my daughter went to Doherty, but it is a very impressive project. It is currently, the last project estimate had it at $314 million. The city had to borrow $23 million midstream because of increased costs due to inflation. The state has already provided $80 million and plans to provide another 75. And we heard, though we're awaiting confirmation, that just a few days ago, the MSBA approved an additional $28.7 million due to the cost overruns at Doherty due to inflation and the increased project costs. As Dr. Monárrez noted, It has a potential enrollment of 1,670 students. And I should note, as someone who attended all the project meetings, some neighbors questioned those estimates. Those are done in deliberate, coordinated effort with the state to ensure that they're the most objective enrollment projections possible. Those are based on solid statistical analysis, not wishful thinking on anyone's part regarding the student count. The current building was built in the late 60s, is 168,000 square feet. It is going to be 422,000 square feet. And to her point, Chapter 74, which are vocational education programs, there's going to be several at the new school: programming and web development, marketing, management, and finance, construction craft, and a district-wide biotechnology advanced academy. Now, what we've heard relative to the other high school projects, north and south, is that when they actually opened, enrollment exceeded projections that were based on those projects. So I think that's notable as well. Before we move into the rest of the report, I do want to just share that the Bureau released a tool in January, an interactive visualization tool called Understanding Your Neighborhood Schools. Please go to our website and check it out. It's not a traditional report the way I'm talking about this facilities report, but it complements it because you're able, as you can see in this imagery, you can click any school in the city of Worcester. It will give you the year it was built, the square footage, the enrollment, student-teacher ratio, race and ethnicity of the students, and you can compare that against the school catchment zone, race, ethnicity, median age, educational attainment, and income. So this is intentionally designed to raise everyone's awareness of their neighborhood schools and frankly, their capital needs as well and how they vary. Now, there's very robust literature, particularly in the last 20 years, on the positive impact of school facility investments. Now, these are felt in everything from, it should be obvious, but I think it needs to be said, student learning outcomes are heavily impacted by school facilities. Housing markets are impacted as well, the health and well-being of students and staff. There's ongoing federal programs now, like the Inflation Reduction Act, provided new potential tools for schools to look at eco-friendly construction and climate-friendly HVAC systems. That's heat and air conditioning and air movement. Community engagement and equitable project selection in school safety. And one overriding element, which we put in blue here, is districts that serve more socioeconomically disadvantaged students benefit more from facilities investments, experiencing larger increases in both test scores and housing prices. And these issues are issues that have been being managed by the Worcester Public Schools in the city, but the pandemic certainly thrust it to the forefront. There was significant capital investment that needed to be made in the air circulation systems in the schools. As many of you have experienced, either as alums or parents of students, many of the Worcester Public Schools have boilers. They don't even have modern HVAC systems. So the idea of a prescriptive requirement of increasing air movement is incredibly complicated in a New England school in January with a boiler. It really necessitated opening windows, which, as you can imagine, raises a whole set of other problems. So our report takes a three-pronged approach. We analyzed Worcester's partnerships with, to the superintendent's point, the state entity, the School Building Assistance Authority, the MSBA, and we also were able to provide some context to Worcester's success compared to peer cities. We examined the city and the district's efforts to improve school facilities through everything from the capital improvement plan, the school strategic plan, and other initiatives. And although it is aged, so you're going to hear me note that several times, we were able to conduct an initial analysis of the 2017 facilities plan, which only looked at the 28 oldest schools. And to the superintendent's point, there's 60 buildings, 46 campuses, and we looked at the student data as well from that time period. Now, it's important just to stop here for a minute, make sure everyone knows the size and complicated factors of the Worcester Public Schools. The public schools in Worcester serve 24,000 students. It's one of the largest districts in the state, and there are very significantly sized populations of economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and English language learners. And as the superintendent said far better than I, the age of the buildings is paramount. I mean, you can look at some of these buildings and easily see how they're over 100 years old. Now, working with the state is not a matter of simply assembling a dream image of your school and getting magically reimbursed. So to be crystal clear, like any other government-driven process, this is enormously deliberative, documentative, and there's a huge series of requirements. MSBA was reformed about 20 years ago and set aside a specific funding source of 1 penny from the state sales tax. Now, it should be noted, we are tremendously fortunate in the city of Worcester and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that we are one of only 9 states who primarily fund school construction and renovation projects. They do so through 2 programs. You're going to hear us refer to this, the core program, which we think of as rebuilding or reconstruction. That's shown on this flow chart. And it starts with a statement of interest that has to be accepted by the state. So it is not something where any community can move forward. You have to document and justify with the statement of interest to be included in the limited capacity the state has for these projects. The other program is the Accelerated Repair Program, which works with districts to address significant repair needs. Now, it should be noted that this isn't just the Worcester Public Schools. In fact, the city of Worcester plays a key leadership role in school facility issues. So when we talk about Worcester and the MSBA, it is not simply the Worcester Public Schools, it is Worcester collectively, the city and the school department. And these projects could not have proceeded without key city leadership. So what's happened in recent years is the new Doherty School, which is expected to open in the fall of 2024. And it should be noted, it's not getting the same level of attention, but the Worcester Arts Magnet School had a roof replacement. And just to go into this for a moment, it's $7 million now. It was initially $2 million in 2021. What ended up happening, however, was the cost of the roof replacement exceeded 30% of the assessed building value. So that triggered a requirement that the entire building had to be made compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. That's based on state regulation. That in turn led to an additional $5 million loan by the city, which is not reimbursable by the state. So I think that provides a pretty clear case study and example of some of the consequences fiscally for a municipal government to try to deal with these issues without state support. And there's a variable impact on communities. That 30% threshold would not be triggered at the same level in many Eastern Mass communities, particularly the city of Boston, because those thresholds, although 30% doesn't change, as you can imagine, property values do. Now, Worcester also, over the series since 2011 to 2023, had 193.7 million in core program was the average cost, and the average cost of accelerated repair projects is 2.7. And this provides some context for how Worcester has fared with the state compared to other cities. So just to pause on this for a moment, you can see Worcester is one of the leading communities in the state for a high number of relatively cost-effective school reconstruction and rebuilding projects and repair projects. Now you can see here we're the second highest in accelerated repair projects, we're the second highest in core projects, and we're the second highest in total cost. for accelerated repair and second lowest in accelerated repair costs. Now, it is important to note here, because it's been said, how do we come in number 2 to Boston? Boston has participated at varying rates with the state, and as a matter of fact, Mayor Wu has a comprehensive plan she is putting forward for school facility needs, which would include significant municipal bonding, even apart from the state building authority. And other communities like Cambridge, which have an enormously robust commercial tax base, actually fund those themselves without using state support. So there are some caveats to this language, but you can see that from an analysis standpoint, the city of Worcester should be commended for doing so well. As a matter of fact, we've had $580 million in school construction. That includes Doherty, $209 million for South, and $57 million for Nelson Place Elementary School. So while the elementary school projects are smaller than high schools and at lower cost, you can see $57 million is nothing to sneeze at either. That's a significant amount of money. And as the superintendent announced, we're all very excited that Burncoat in December was invited to work with the MSBA and is now in the feasibility study phase. It will clarify the scope. And the key factor here, as many of us know, is whether or not the junior high school is included, because they share infrastructure and site work. The hope is that they would be included, but that's a fundamental issue that still needs to be addressed. And it's important to share, because it's not commonly understood, the capital needs at Burncoat High led its accreditation to be at risk. And the schools should be commended. They have worked for years to keep the accreditation active by doing a tremendous amount of financial investments in active site work. But in the end, you can't lose accreditation for one of the city's 5 major high schools. That it would have a profound impact on graduates, alums, and scholars. And that's simply unacceptable for the second largest city in New England. Now, in terms of the city's activity, now I need to figure out how to go back. My apologies. Okay. So the city's capital improvement plan, this pie chart shows how it works, but the plan is $100.5 million in FY 2024. And this breaks it down. There's $85 million for the school building projects, 4.9 for non-state supported projects in a sprinkler academy, a sprinkler upgrade to the Challenge and Reach Academy, 10 million for HVAC upgrades, and $500,000 for capital equipment. I do want to add an explanation here. This is not 100 million in municipal funds. The funding sources, there's 36 million coming from the state building authority, and there's 10 million coming in federal relief funds. The rest are borrowed by the city of Worcester. Now, the city's contribution includes 48 million, which is a very significant amount for Doherty and Worcester Arts Magnet. And as I explained, the Worcester Arts Magnet funding was largely not eligible for state reimbursement. And the city should be lauded for providing 3.5 million for 9 non-state eligible repair projects. Other initiatives by the city, including spending 15 million during the pandemic on HVAC upgrades, which was absolutely crucial to getting the schools reopened. I happen to know that because I had 2 kids in the Worcester Public Schools at the time and was following the debate from a personal attentive side. Now, the city manager should be commended because City Manager Batista recommended in the fall that the city set aside $1 million from an unexpected increase in tax levy to provide towards school facilities investments. That is a significant amount of money for the city to set aside, though the amount of need obviously far exceeds it. I also want to commend the manager and the superintendent. I know she and the manager are engaged in ongoing discussions on school facility needs, and that's unprecedented. And I also want to note, city manager is an alum of the Worcester Public Schools as well, so it's always nice to have someone like that in the city manager role. But the previous city managers were tremendously focused on these high school reconstruction projects and making the capital investment needed for the city, and they should be commended. Now, the Worcester Public Schools is obviously doing everything they can to address facility needs as well. A comprehensive safety audit was reported back in November of 2023, which identified potential areas of improvement across the district, and that's being carried out as we speak and prioritized. The superintendent referred to the strategic plan. That was a crucial effort with a very strong community advisory element, and I consider myself very fortunate. Jen and I played a leadership role in that effort, and I think many people on this Zoom probably did as well. They're to be commended that a whole new element and priority of the strategic plan is now facilities. That was not the case in the previous plans, and it's a really important element. And you can see here that what it's going to lead to is issuing a new master plan for Worcester Public School facilities, updating maintenance reporting and response systems, and making a priority to secure more state and local resources to dedicate to facilities. Also, federal relief funds are flowing to the schools called ESSER funding. $22 million is being spent through the fall 2024 for HVAC and other necessary improvements in the Honeywell project. So that's critically important.
Paul, you have about 3 minutes.
Okay, I will speed up. I don't think I need to go into the line item comparison. There is a facilities master plan in 2017 that she referred to. She covered the overall cost, but you can see here, it's an enormous number, and that number has only gone up. And incidentally, this report is 1,383 pages. So I want to commend my colleague Anthony for not only reading it, but analyzing it. So we were able to look at the student population in 2017. That was 28 of 46 schools, 62% of the facilities, but only 47% of the students. And so the findings are still unclear, but we think it's vitally important, given the complexity of the student body, that the schools carefully consider equity elements as they look at need in the city for facilities. Now, our recommendations in the report are to develop a data-driven priority list as part of this facilities master plan on behalf of the neediest schools, ensure a data-driven, transparent, and equitable selection process. So this needs to be objective. It cannot, frankly, be political. It should be determined the financial and educational impacts are too high for it not to be objective and data-driven. There should be an examination of student demographics and need, and this needs to be very specifically said. The SSMA study pointed out there needs to be a deliberative process identifying necessary consolidation of schools, given the fact some of the schools are outdated from a safety and educational standpoint, and there simply is not enough money to rebuild every single elementary school. I recognize that is a tremendously complicated undertaking. It is one that does need to happen from an objective standpoint, because the city, the schools, the taxpayers, and the Commonwealth together cannot replace every single elementary and middle school in the city. It's simply impossible. And lastly, and a very important issue to lead to before I hand it over to Representative Keith, is there is a huge opportunity here to point to the success Worcester has had with MSBA and point to the remaining need in Worcester and the other gateway cities. We have age schools. It is critically important to the Commonwealth's future, economically and otherwise, to ensure that we have a strong education system. We can certainly build on examples of success with MSBA, but there should be a revisiting and an updating of MSBA's resources and programming to meet the need in Worcester and other cities. The situations in Worcester have pointed to the possibility of land acquisition, ADA compliance, like I talked about Worcester Arts Magnet and other issues. And there is a tremendously strong fact-based case for the state to step up and match the innovative leadership of the Worcester Public Schools in the city of Worcester, led by the superintendent and the manager, so that the state can be part of finding innovative responses as well. And We look forward to hearing what Representative Keefe has to say. We look forward to working with community organizations, students, families, the schools, the city council, the school committee, and our legislators, and we're honored to be able to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you, Paul. Let me now introduce Representative Mary Keefe, who will talk to us about the state's role in this and some of the things that are happening in the legislature. Mary.
So thank you, Jen, and thanks for this opportunity. And I wanted to say thank you, Paul, for the report. Look forward to reading that. And thank you, Superintendent Monárrez, for really focusing in on this. I know it was an early conversation that we had when you first came to the city, and it's just resonated so clearly with so many people here in the city around needing to do some of this tough work. And it is going to take a long time, but there's some relief in just the fact that we're here doing this forum today, and that we're all working together. And that's another piece of it. Sometimes when we look at, issues like this, it becomes a blame game of who dropped the ball and why isn't this happening? And we're not doing that in this case. And I think it's just the best way to go. So we're trying to figure out on all levels of government, how can we work together to find the resources that we can put in place to start making the difference in our schools. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening on the state level. And in my conversations, again, with colleagues, especially from gateway cities, that's post-industrial cities like Worcester, again, it really resonated. And it also has something to do, a little bit to do with our housing situation right now as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Paul referred to as the 30% trigger and some of the work that's happening there. I feel like every time I talk about this, I should be Robert Reich making a little drawing on the screen. So, but I'm going to use words. So what Paul referred to, and everything he said is true. The way I like to describe it to people is to say, imagine two buildings that are exactly the same. One is in Newton and one is in Worcester. The one in Newton is actually assessed value at $900,000, where the one in Worcester is $300,000. And that's kind of a reality. We all know what's happening in Boston. This goes for our school buildings, our public buildings as well, but it's affected our housing situation. So the owner of the building in Newton can spend up to $300,000 before tripping the trigger that requires those heavier accessible regulations. Whereas in Worcester, that would happen at $100,000. So we're kind of handcuffed about what we can spend in our buildings without getting hammered with that heavy regulation. And so we're trying to figure out on the state level what we can do to change that. We have a dream team that we put together, and it's Representative Farley Bouvier from Pittsfield and Representative Duffy from Holyoke, that really, this just, like I said, resonated and they stepped right up. And then we're working with some organizations like Massachusetts Planning Initiative and Massachusetts Community Development Corporations. They've all kind of gone, whoa, what is this? So we want to find a place, a way of changing the 30% trigger that helps us move in the right direction, whether you're a Boston city or a Worcester city. And so besides the dream team, we're going to be presenting to the Gateway City Caucus in the month of March. We gave our pitch last week, and we're going to be the full presentation in March. So I'm glad to share that with people as it comes together. Last week, I had my yearly meeting with House Ways and Means to identify my own particular district priorities. but I did spend some time talking with the chairman about this 30% trigger. And I asked him, I said, are you familiar with this? And he said, absolutely, right away. Yes. So, so I think that with some good minds and some experts, we can find a different way of getting a different way of calculating this. And it could possibly be replacement costs as opposed to assessed value. And that came from the city manager suggesting that if we were doing replacement costs, it sort of levels the field because labor and materials would be the same in all communities. So that's that, and that's exciting to think about the difference it could make. Also, when you do start talking about the school building authority, and as Paul said, they've been especially good to the city of Worcester. But all communities aren't the same, right? And so the needs are different. And a lot of my colleagues have filed some great bills addressing the formula that they use and prioritizing some other needs. There's Senator Creighton, who is from Lynn, and House Representative Capano have filed a bill that's pretty comprehensive. They want to double the budget of the school building authority. They'd like to remove the cap of 80% reimbursement. They're looking to revamp the formula so it's more equitable to all communities, and they want to prioritize schools with reintegration plans, schools that are really looking to have diversity as a priority. And there's a number of them here. A lot of them are to set up a commission that looks at the SBA in terms of its effectiveness, to make sure that we're being fair in terms of every community and how we treat them. 21st century and technology, as the superintendent said, it's here to stay. We can't ignore it. And we're shortchanging our students if we're not addressing that. So a number of bills that were filed to do that. Prioritizing schools in the state receivership. So schools that the state has come in, like Paul said, Burncoat was at stake of losing its not classification, certification, right? So accreditation. So any school that's been impacted in that way, that they would be prioritized in terms of the funding. But the last one that I didn't know about this one, and I thought this was really interesting. Rep. Dom is the representative from Amherst, and she's filed something called an Act to Establish Green and Healthy Schools, a Green and Healthy Schools working group that would work on implementation and enforcement. That sounds kind of hard, but when you work in the legislature, you realize there's a lot of feel-good bills that in the end, they don't do very much. You have to watchdog it at the same time. So this bill would direct the Department of Public Health to convene an interagency working group on green and healthy schools for the next 2 decades. So it's a long view of what we need to do. They would recommend a plan for implementation and enforcement standards for cost-effective renovation and rehab of existing school buildings. This speaks exactly to what we've been talking about, you know, the age of our buildings, the condition of our buildings, and new construction school buildings. And the deadline for meeting those guidelines would be 2050. And this bill was reported favorable to Ways and Means. So I'm going to track this bill down. I'm going to talk to Mindy Dom because I think it speaks exactly to what we've heard here today. So work in progress. We're hoping to do something, find a vehicle where we can change the 30% trigger. It could be the housing bond bill that's coming before us soon, or it could be maybe an outside section in the budget. But I'm glad to hear that Ways and Means gets it. They understand it. And he said as soon as we could have something to present to them, they'd be glad to work with us on this. So from my front, that's it. It's exciting. I'm really glad to be part of this. I think it's great work. I also want to say thank you again to Superintendent Monárrez for the team she's put together working on this in the facilities. They're just fantastic. And they've really identified some really good changes that have to happen. So with that, thank you
Okay.
all.
Thank you. And thank you, Mary, for all that you do downtown on our behalf. Well, now I'm going to pass the microphone to Noe Medina, who is going to moderate our question and answer period. Noe?
Thank you, Jen, and thanks everybody for the wonderful conversations that information you've shared with us. We want to have a little bit of time here to ask some questions. Let me invite people to drop any questions they have in the chat, and I'll read them for you. So we do have a question we received earlier, and let me throw it out to the panel. Gordon Davis asks, what is the status of elementary schools that are substandard, such as Chandler Street, Grafton Street, Rice Square? Who keeps this list? Are the meetings public? Presumably discuss this.
So I can speak to that. I just want to clarify, Gordon, if you can just, when you say status, do you mean status of it being, of the schools being remodeled, or what exactly on the status are you looking for? You still here?
I
don't
just
see
gave
anything.
Gordon the option to unmute, which had been disabled, so
Got it, thank you.
another minute.
If I could offer a general observation for everyone involved, the school committee meetings are public, and I strongly urge people to observe and participate in the school committee meetings, because this is the forum where these issues are discussed within the Worcester Public Schools. So those are all absolutely transparent. I'm not sure the list he's referring to. The list of the 2017 report is, like I said, it's over 1,000 pages long. So that is online, but just be forewarned, if you try to download it to your computer, be prepared for a long time for it to download.
And I presume from what you say, Paul, that there isn't any kind of ongoing or active updating of that list that is going on. That was a one-time assessment, correct?
Absolutely correct. The school department paid a professional firm, SSMA, to go out and assemble this information on a one-time basis. So that's why the superintendent and the school committee and the strategic plan have going out and updating that facilities plan. And again, it's 28 of the schools, which is not 100%. And at the time, it was a limited percentage of the student body as well. So.
What I can say, I don't know if Gordon was able to unmute, but this is what I can tell you about any of our elementary schools. Well, I'm going to speak a bit broader first. As we work with the city manager and his team, what we're working on is having a master plan of facilities for the entire city. So school buildings make up the majority of the city buildings, but they're not the sole buildings of the city. We have other buildings in the city. And so because we're coming from the same pot of money, we wanted to have a very comprehensive look at what's going on in the city in terms of buildings, but also as we see new construction coming in and new homes or places for people to live, that has implications for schools as well, because enrollment can change, right? So we are also, this is why we need this comprehensive approach to it collectively. It's my understanding that hadn't been the way that things were done in the past. And so now we're doing that together. We're almost done, and our plan is to take the full picture of the facilities to both city council and school committee, so everyone knows what the big picture looks like. Then from there, we are prioritizing where our different schools, what the needs are of each school. And believe it or not, Grafton Street, which it is, I believe, the oldest school in the district, is in much better condition than some of even my newer elementary schools, surprisingly. And so it's pretty full, right? Rice Square is very full. I know at Rice Square in particular, we've got some challenges in the restroom areas and those kind of things. And so we're aware of these. We're also looking at, because these schools are very full, how might we start to consider some boundary changes of where children go to school, but that has other implications. So it's not something you move on very quickly, because families get very connected to their home school, right? And so we will go slow to go fast on this. But there is, so too, I think, to the question of, is there a list? We're working on that list collectively in this facilities master plan with our city manager and his team. And then, are the meetings public? So our planning meetings that we do internally, no, those aren't public, because, and honestly, you don't want to go to them. They're not worth going to. That's where we're doing all the planning and the work. But then when we have something to bring forward, those are indeed public. And as Paul said, they're either you can go to the larger school committee meeting, which is the first and third Thursday of every month, both in person or virtually. You can do either one. And then any more detailed work that we're going to do in the facilities conversation would be during a subcommittee, which is our finance, operation, and governance subcommittee, that are also public meetings that you can attend in person or you can log on virtually. And all of those dates are listed on the district website under the school committee link. So or landing page. So I hope that I answered your question, Gordon.
And if I could, Superintendent, I also put in the chat a link. Again, the report was done in 2017 to 2018, but I put the link for the SSMA facilities plan. And again, just word of warning, if you try to download it, it's 1,000+ pages, so be ready. But that is in the chat.
Spend the rest of the afternoon waiting. Thank you.
But no, I'd like to add something.
Sure.
I think one of my takeaways from reading the report, looking at the online tool, and conversations with others, is that this is not something, the issue of the elementary schools and all of the other school buildings that the district is responsible for is not going to be solved by the city and the school department on its own, or in the context of the rules and regulations that guide the school building authority. It's going to, to address this, to address this issue broadly, and to address the issues of equity that are raised by this, is going to require some changes at the state level. And I think that's something we all need to keep an eye on and all need to be advocating for.
And presumably it's also going to take time.
Yeah.
It's not something, as we heard earlier, it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time to plan, it takes time to prioritize, and that takes time to do. So that's also part of it. Again, if folks have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So a general question from me, like what do you suggest that if they're community members or organizations sort of interested in supporting, contributing, being part of these efforts, what suggestions do you have for what they could do? How can they be involved? How can they help? What can they do to advance this work?
If I could respond first, feel free to read our report and use the tool that we've created so that you can learn more about your neighborhood schools. But I do just want to echo Jen's point and be crystal clear here. Our report is not blaming the Worcester Public Schools for the facilities. It's not blaming the city for the facilities. It's not blaming anyone. But the fact remains, there is tremendous need, and the state needs to be part of the answer. So I caution everyone, please don't treat this as an exercise of complaining to your school committee members, complaining to your city councilors, complaining to your state legislators. It's a matter of calling attention to the need for everyone to work together. And the city and schools are, and the superintendent and manager are to be commended. And I mean that. I mean, the manager did not, there are a lot of things the manager could have recommended spending $1 million on from surplus tax revenue. He chose to make one of his priorities the Worcester Public School facilities, and he's to be commended for that. And the council ratified it, so they're to be commended. But we all need to recognize here that there needs to be a significant discussion. I remember when MSBA was first initiated as a result of, I won't name the community, but it came up earlier in the chat. There was a community in Eastern Massachusetts that basically put together a proposal that was unbelievably expensive. And as a consequence, MSBA was created in an effort to provide direction to communities as well as funding on how to best address school facility needs. And likewise, that was a discussion that happened within the legislature, but engaging educators, school committees, municipalities, that has to happen again. And I will add, we've been part of conversations on the state level, and there's been a widespread appetite for our report. So we're fully expecting the impact of this report is not just within the city of Worcester, but will help inform and hopefully fuel those discussions on a state level.
Julia, I think Gordon needs help getting unmuted.
Yes, Gordon, actually, you should be unmuted now. Do you want to speak? Hi, Gordon. We're ready for
Gordon?
your comments if you're there.
Gordon, are you there? All right, we'll wait for Gordon. I've got another question. When will we know if the Burncoat Middle School will be added? Will that delay the city and any other progress for elementary schools being done? Do you have a timeline? Anyone have a timeline on that?
Actually, there will be something going to school committee on the next agenda, requesting to move forward with including Burncoat in the Burncoat Middle in that. It is an approval process. So first it goes to school committee, then it goes to city council. And then once those two entities say yes, then we could submit what's called the statement of interest for Burncoat Middle. So we're working on it. And that actually will be on the agenda. I kind of didn't want to say that before because the agenda is not posted yet, but it'll be posted tomorrow afternoon.
An early sneak peek.
But
Noe,
Yes,
if I
Mary.
could just speak, what I had heard when I first delved into this a little bit was that after Burncoat, Worcester won't be eligible for another round of funding to build another school until 2032. So that goes to superintendent's choice of words around missing a whole generation. And it also goes to show that if that is actually holds true and no changes happen to the way the SBA is run, then we really need to address the deferred maintenance that is right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Building a new school isn't going to be as easy as it may have been. So,
and I'll add to that, Representative Keefe. As the structure exists now, right? If there's no changes with with how the funding happens for school buildings. Even if MSBA said, sure, we'll take on another school, the city can't afford it.
Right.
Because the city side of it is just, it's just costing so much. And so this is why we need to have another option or another way, or just because we have so many elementary schools that just aren't being touched. And I think that, you know, maybe some of the advocacy to the question that you asked, Noe, I don't want us to make enemies with MSBA, because that's not it's not what we're looking to do. But might the accelerated repair be broader than the 3 areas that they currently have? So right now, you can apply for accelerated repair for boilers, for windows, and for roofs. That's it. Might they be able to include restrooms, for example? Might they be able to include new flooring? I mean, because these are the things I see when I walk the schools, right? Might they be able to include some kind of infrastructure that would help the technology side of things, because our right, might that be some of the areas that they could that could expand if indeed they get more money, and could they open up some of that, because that would make a big difference. What I see happening right now in our schools, because I'll walk them with my facilities, and I'm like, how come we can't address this on the stairs? For example, we've got children going up and down these stairs, and the building's not that old. Like a school that's in 1960s is honestly not that old when you compare it to, 1900s. But then what they tell me is, Rachel, if we start pulling that up, the asbestos and all that comes behind it, right? And how do we address that? And so we pause on things. But if we could get some help in that, we could do some more of this, what I refer to as modernization, and not have to wait until we have a full tear down. That would be very helpful.
Do they really focus on some of the policy advocacy that folks could address, rather than trying to construct more schools, in terms of changing some of the rules that exist there?
Those are some of the things that I
Yeah.
see. And mind you, we haven't even talked about at elementary schools, like playgrounds and parking. Like that's what my staff's concerned about. They have no place to park. Children are playing on blacktops. That's also the parking for the teachers. Now, I get it. We live in a city. We have limited space. But these are things that our children, like, they need them. So how do we do that? I don't have the answer.
And if I could add, some of the national literature we reviewed indicate the importance of particular investments to student education performance. And part of that is obvious and intuitive, and part of it isn't, like HVAC and roofs. It turns out not having the building drip on you is a good thing.
And not tripping on everything because you're too hot.
Right. And I think we all, coming out of the pandemic, understand the importance of indoor air quality in a way that we did not grasp beforehand.
So I have one more question, and hopefully people can give some quick responses to it before we run out of time. Are there any plans or discussions about how to improve the inclusion and mobility of children with physical disabilities in this discussion?
Yes, there is. I mean, like, so that's that's a whole nother, I'll tell you, I've been at schools where I've seen, because we only have, stairs, right? We
Yeah.
have some schools that have it, but not all, right? So this one particular school, the parent brings the child in every day, the principal and the parent take the child out of the wheelchair, carry him up the stairs, put him in the wheelchair, put him into class. I just stood there and I said, oh my goodness, right? It's these kind of things that you start to feel like it is very insurmountable to address it. So it's part of the conversation. Yeah, but again, where does that's not an accelerated repair. That the district would have to, take on, and on top of it's just limited resources. But part of the work that happened at Worcester Arts, as Paul referenced, included fixing the ADA because we had to. But it's a good thing because I just walked that school earlier this week and yeah, everything's great. That happened to be the school where the pipe busted. Wasn't the roof. It was a different situation. So yes, but it's that time, it's that, and it's a funding thing. It's terrible. It's terrible that we have to have these conversations.
It is, no, I'm very glad you raised it because I want to be clear with everyone listening. The financial element of ADA implication is something we just talked about, but there is absolutely an impact on students, teachers, and families about ADA access. So although we talked about it in reference to a financial implication, it is an issue the city as a whole struggles with, and governments at all levels struggle with, about providing appropriate access to everyone regardless of disability. And that's something that absolutely has to be an ongoing priority. And I think that, you know, from what I've seen of the Doherty project being in South High, it's quite obvious that when you're reconstructing, that's something that can be predicated into the project. And it presents there are some very real needs here, and I'm glad you raised it.
No, we
Thanks.
have
Yeah.
about 3 more minutes.
Yes, I was going to thank you, Jen. That is the last question. Thank you, folks. If I would, we have a survey we'd like people to complete to get some feedback in terms of this event. It's something new we're trying to put in place. Please take a few minutes to go to the survey. It's a short survey. You got the links have been dropped in the chat in both English and Spanish. So please give us your feedback so we can improve these events, make them more appropriate to your needs and your interests, and just share your thoughts on that. So please just take a couple of minutes to do that before we go. And Jen, let me turn it back to you to close this out. Thank you, folks, for all your comments.
Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us and listening to what was at some points a very technical conversation about this critical issue. This for me is not just an issue of what facilities the kids go to school in, but it is a question not just for now, but a question for our future. It's also a question of equity. The children in our district don't have aspirations that are different from the children in any other district. And so we together, the district, the city, the community, and the state really do need to work together to come up with a workable situation that will allow our kids to have not just a sound infrastructure in terms of the building, but also the learning infrastructure inside and the things that every child should have: a playground, the ability to get in and out of the building without difficulty. So this is a task for all of us. So our work is ahead of us, and we will all need to be marching in the same direction on this. So thank you. Any final thoughts from any of our panelists or Noe? No, all right. Thank you, everyone. And please take a moment to do that survey. It's very helpful to us in planning our future events. All right. Good evening, everyone, and onward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.